Well, hello, my name is Tara Morris. I am a rancher and a farm-to-table producer of grass-fed beef. My husband and I started our farm in 2016, so we're brand new first-generation farmers in Louisiana, South Louisiana, just north of Baton Rouge. And we started selling direct farm to table because of the cash flow situation. Being beginning farmers, we literally started with zero land, on leased land only. So we have a really neat story of how we started, but that's not what this is about. This is about a diversification that we added in 2023 to our program. So here's me and my husband and my two children from a picture from last year, and some of our cattle in the background. As you may know, that in Louisiana, we can run tremendous amounts of cattle per acre. So that is to our advantage and a very unique situation compared to a lot of places. We began our operation simply with cattle with the intention of selling calves only, but we soon realized the benefit of the cash flow situation if we were to go ahead and do some beef sales. So we added having retail cuts from the butcher. We started off wanting to do halves and wholes only, but without a trust built in our clientele. This was in 2018 that we had our first animals for sale. Without that trust built up, no one was willing to buy a half or a whole, especially of grass-fed, grass-finished beef. It was not as popular as it is now. So we have moved into this grass-finished beef retail. Is what we went with. I had a marketing and sales background, so it was a no-brainer to go ahead and just get some labeled. We expected to sell 4 steers the first year. Our scale is quite small on our farm. Our first year in 2016, 2016, we bought 13 cattle, and then we bumped up to about 20, and then we're up to about on foot on a farm at any location. We have a total of about 300 head of cattle now. So anyway, back to the process. We did retail cuts from the butcher and went to the farmer's market in our small town of St. Francisville, Louisiana. We started doing that as a simple way to sell, and we sold out the first year. Then, of course, COVID hit. And in COVID, all the farmers markets that we had tried to go to were shutting down, and public places were shutting down. So we very quickly pivoted to doing delivery routes and pickup points. And that has tremendously grown in popularity since COVID. And that is our primary source of sales now. And we also have added through that process some minimal wholesale outlets. We have some tiny grocery stores that we supply very small amounts of beef to. And then right now, our model is that we sell at farmers markets whatever is left over. And so whenever we have what we found with farmers markets, it's a great place to sell diversified products that wouldn't normally sell, that people wouldn't think of buying, such as oxtail, liver, or organ meats for dog food. And it's also an insanely good marketing tool. Farmers markets is where we can interact with our customers and meet people. But last year, in 2023, we randomly started getting phone calls and emails from schools. And this was a very strange point. The picture is wrong right here, and that's okay. But these emails and phone calls were unexpected. We had no idea that schools would be looking for beef. And I think the first phone call was the school that my kids were going to, which is a small charter school with about 40 to 50 students per grade. So we talked and we visited, and then a large school district called very quickly. It was all within a very short amount of time. And so we started getting all these requests, and we have built up now to add simply another route of sales. It's another diversification part of our marketing. And so farm to school beef is here. So we're going to talk today about the pros and cons, our experience in 2023 with dealing with schools. It was the 22 to 23 school year. So yeah, we're going to talk about the pros and cons, what we learned, Of course, we had never sold to schools. We didn't know who the contact person was. We didn't know the terminologies, didn't know their needs. But they were reaching out because we had apparently years and years ago, I went to a workshop and it signed me up for a list that had us on a list in Louisiana for approved companies to sell to schools. We're going to talk more about that as well. So some tips, what is the farm to school program? The term farm to school is, in our state anyway, there's an overarching organization called Seeds to Success. And the farm to school funds can be used in three ways, which I just learned this year after dealing with this. It can be used to source and pay for grant money for schools to purchase farm to school foods. And this is minimally processed, raw foods, essentially. The second part is gardens, school gardens. That is also funded in the farm to school monies. And then also education. And as far as curriculum and teaching about farm products in the schools. So those 3 points is where these funds are going for, but a huge chunk is going to schools, at least in our state and across the nation. This just got approved. This number right here, $1.7 billion was allotted in October of 2024. This is simply a continuation of the dollars that were given to schools to pay for the beef that we supplied in 2023. So $1.7 billion across the nation to be distributed to states and then to schools to help supplement. So our beef was paid for by grant funding with some limitations. Very few people that we have ever dealt with or visited with about this farm to school program, none of us were prepared. We had no clue that this was coming down. At least we didn't. I never heard other farmers talk about it. It was a very new concept for us. We simply never imagined that grant monies were being given to schools. And I think that was a very new program in 2023, at least in our state. So it came with some challenges. If you think about the different commodities, the different foods, cattle and beef is one of the longest turnover times to make it into food products. In our state, rice is a big deal, but rice has a hard time to pivot from being sold as a contract and then being able to direct, having a mill that you can take it to. There are some steps that have to be done with these foods. And so that was one of the biggest struggles that we encountered is, of course, we needed butcher spots to add for schools. Rice would need a mill to take to and packaging and a lot of extra effort to direct market. Now, vegetables, I feel like a vegetable farm is in an ideal spot to be able to quickly pivot and do farm to table beef, farm to table foods, because they can simply, if they know about it, 6 months ahead of time, they can plant a little more. They can, especially small farms. And that's kind of where the benefit is a small farm can easily pivot, or ranch can easily pivot to do this farm to school program. Let's see. So what foods can the schools utilize for this program? They are limited to fresh, local, minimally processed, and domestic. So that is what they're looking for and what they're required to have. What cuts are they looking for? In talking with food service providers, whether that's the school nutrition manager, the school district nutrition manager, the cafeteria manager, we're going to talk about key players later. We found that what they need, a lot of these kitchens no longer in schools, they don't even own a knife. They are used to being able to throw frozen food in the oven, pull it out and be done, or cook maybe one step, add something to it and be done. So that was the best. The best for us was ground beef to be able to provide for them. It was what they needed the most. It's what they used the most. It was the easiest. It didn't require slow cooking compared to like a roast. Some were interested in stew meat. However, our butcher has to hand cut stew meat. Our butcher shop is not a huge commercial butcher shop. It's a small local butcher shop. And I told the school if you ask my butcher shop to provide 300 pounds of stew meat for you, they're going to fire me as a customer because they're not going to hand cut all that. They have to debone it and then cut it. So that's what the schools are looking for is ease, something that cooks quickly, no further processing. Ground beef was just an extremely easy thing. Lettuce, I feel like, has been a good fit for them. Oranges, um, eat just easy foods. I get the question a lot of what are schools willing to pay? And the answer is whatever my price is. I never ever minced my prices for the schools. They have grant funds being generously given to them per student that they're feeding. And so, however much I can supply, they're willing to take at this point where there's not enough competition in the market. They reached out, and since we were all so underprepared for this program, they were willing to take the first person who would answer the phone or answer an email. And I heard from many schools that they had reached out to several beef farms in my area and in Louisiana and had gotten no response back. And it was people who were on this approved list, but I think that all of us were overwhelmed with the process. All of us already had our sales set, and we were completely unprepared for this. So that's to our advantage for pricing. Um, what's most important to these schools is the ease of purchasing, the ease of the process. Again, if you're willing to answer emails and communicate or answer phone calls. Some states may require bids, but in our state, the minimum amount requiring a bid was increased significantly for this farm to school program. What that means is, whereas they used to have a bid if they were going to spend like $50,000 with a vendor, that was raised to something insanely large, like $250,000 and less. They don't have to get a bid for. So if you're willing to do the work and you're willing to answer the phone and you can supply that much, then you don't have to have a bid for that. You can simply take it and run with it. They do have budgets and deadlines and guidelines and some paperwork involved. Not a lot of paperwork for most of the schools we've dealt with, especially the smaller school districts have simply asked us to send invoices beforehand and deliver it and have a packing slip. And that's all the paperwork we've had to do. That's not always the case, and I don't think that will continue to be the case. I think that there will be some more paperwork needed in the future as this goes forward. Um, and again, the reason schools are interested in this, I heard from one school that they posted our picture of us delivering beef to their school on social media, and that was one of the most liked posts. And same thing, we posted one about one of our local schools that we supplied some beef to, and it was extremely popular. It was one of our most liked posts. People are excited that their kids at school are going to get local foods. They're very excited about that. So it's a win for the school's PR. It's a win for the farms. And I think that if we have to spend grant money, this is a grant money well spent. Some challenges that we encountered as a farm being ready for this, of course, was readiness and lead time. Being grass fed and grass finished, it takes us 2 years minimum to finish out a steer. And of course, we already had this diverse marketing method. We had everything pre-sold. We were prepared for continuing the way we'd been continuing. We had no idea this was coming down the line. And so to be able to quickly pivot and make a lot more volume happen all at once, it was a challenge. It was exciting because it was a good time in the growth of our farm to have this extra market, and it made it a lot easier. It took out our need to market and go to farmers market. We were able to almost eliminate our farmers market sales. However, whenever we committed to supplying so much beef for these schools, the availability of the beef that we had began to get limited really fast. And in the meantime, of course, the popularity of local beef has been on a tremendous rise in the last 5 years. So with that combination of having retail customers wanting beef, having schools wanting local beef in large amounts all at once, it was a difficult balancing act for us to make the volume happen. So that's where we come into the volume. Understanding and finding the right person to talk to. we kind of had to know that the principal is not the right person to talk to about what their desires are. The teachers are not that. It is the cafeteria manager, and sometimes not even the cafeteria manager. That sometimes that's a person who handles only the cooking, but not the purchasing. So in some school districts, for example, our small charter school, the cafeteria manager is the right person to talk to. In a larger school district that's supplying about 6 schools with food, they have a dedicated food service manager person who had huge folders of all of their purchasing, had extremely good records, a dedicated office in the school board office, and she was the right person to talk to for that school district. Um, we did not have problems with them finding us because we were on that list that the Seeds to Success team in Louisiana has put together. However, with that being said, I know that all states won't have that availability and that list. So if you don't have a dedicated farm to school, um, that was through our land grant university through LSU. If you don't have that, then it wouldn't hurt to reach out directly to your most local schools and find out, are you a part of this grant funding? Are you looking for local foods? Their expectations and terminology. My goodness, we had some very interesting communication breakdowns there. We would get emails asking for insane amounts of beef, and they always wanted to make sure it was 85/15, packaged in rolls, and delivered this certain way. And so that was a very intimidating step for us to have these specifications laid out to us of what they expected. But again, it came back to communication. I actually scheduled a meeting with some of the food service people and sat down with them and or made a phone call. And it was a lot of back and forth to explain to them that we only butcher one or two at a time. We're not butchering, 10 cattle at a time, and that one cow only yields 300 to 400 pounds of ground meat. That also was completely an unknown for them. They did not realize the limitations of how many cattle it takes to do that. Transportation was a bit of a problem because we do not have refrigerated trucks. We have been used to this retail situation where we load up our delivery boxes into the back of my SUV. We make sure that they're kept cold. We do a short delivery route and we get them from point A to point B and we're done. And so transportation, whenever they expected a refrigerated truck, and I showed up with my SUV and backed up to the loading dock, and I was looking up at the loading dock and couldn't even see, and I was wondering if I'm in the right place or not. They were also wondering if I was in the right place. So they're used to a distributor's truck showing up with cases, and we're not that. But they realize that it's a learning curve for them. And we realized the schools were so receptive to learn from us as farmers and to learn what our limitations are and what slow food looks like versus this, a bigger systems food. Paperwork could be a barrier for some. It's not particularly for me, but again, I don't know many ranchers who can sit down and do a 48 page application for that. Labor and time was a challenge. Fortunately, my husband and I work together, and we do have a team and an orders manager who works part-time for us and delivery drivers who work part-time for us. So we were able to outsource some of the labor needed for this program. When we talked about communication, I wanted to show this email of one that we received earlier this year in August. It's around August or maybe July. This parish, which we have parishes, not counties here, they received the grant, and they have decided that they do need to get quotes because they are doing a very large amount. But 900 cases is what they were looking for. And it says give or take. Thank goodness. I did get more firm quotes about this of people wanting 900 cases, and they had a budget written. They had very specific specs written that they wanted. But you'll see this service is 53 schools. So this is not achievable for our farm at all. It's actually not achievable for any farms that I know in Louisiana, except for two, possibly two. So this is really not an achievable volume that we can deal with here. The quote request, if you look at this, so 900 cases is 100 cull cows, which is 10% of a 1,000 cow operation. Um, a lot of acres in Louisiana, 100 butcher spots, transportation for 36,000 pounds of beef, and a lot of storage. And it doesn't have to all come at once. What the schools are okay with is a compromise here. They're okay with you saying, I can't supply this, but maybe I could supply two of your schools. Can you tell me two of your smallest schools? And can we compromise here? And typically with their if especially if you have a dedicated person to manage this in the school system, they are willing to do that and compromise. This was a 48-page document that we received for quotes. This was just really, really too much. This is them not understanding that farmers don't do paperwork very much anyway. So this was another phone call. I called or emailed back and explained, we can't do this volume. Can we compromise? And really, this was actually me saying no because I knew my volume requirements at this point. What worked for us, of course, is lots of sit down meetings, phone calls, questions. We chose the smallest school districts and smallest schools to supply. And now this year, since we knew our volume with our retail sales was so high this year, we actually chose to supply one small school, and that was it. That's all we could really sustainably do. We chose the very most local within 30 minutes of our farm. Fortunately, we live in a little bit of a suburban area, and we had that luxury of doing that. We talked with one school about some further processing options, such as some small roasts that their staff could cut up. That's a new concept for a lot of these schools, is actually having to further process their raw foods. But it's something that I think they're realizing from what I'm hearing from them, they're realizing that that's a step that may be needed for them to be able to do it better. We did some hiring and some outsourcing, and we charged whatever was our profitable price. We did not go down on price to try to match anything. Sort of the process of what they did is they reached out for quotes. We talked and came up with a plan together. They asked for a pro forma invoice, which I did not know what that was, but apparently it's just before I send the beef, they want to see an invoice of about how much it's going to be. They asked me to send a packing slip with our delivery. The timing of the drop was very important because one of my most embarrassing moments in this process is I took some beef to deliver around 11 o'clock to a school. Well, do you know what cafeterias are doing at 11 o'clock? They're serving lunch. Typically between 10 o'clock and 2 o'clock, they're very busy at the school, especially from until 1 o'clock. So they're used to getting their distributor orders first thing in the morning, like 6 to 7 a.m. Well, that doesn't work for me because I have to pick up the beef from the butcher shop, drive to an hour to the butcher shop, pick up the beef, and then take it to the school. So it was not possible for me to deliver in their window that was perfect for them. So we had to compromise there. I said, can I bring it to you in the afternoon after your lunch? Um, and some of the schools have a warehouse. Some of them you take it directly to the school. You just have to find your compromise there. Some tips for success here is to make sure that you have a sustainable volume. Under promise and over deliver, start small. Typically, if a school doesn't use their funding, that funding can get kicked over to another school. So if you want to leave some undelivered and unpromised, you can do that. We talked about who the key players are. Distributors can be a key player. Sometimes the large school districts are simply wanting to call their distributor truck and say, I don't want to deal with all these farmers. Can you find it for me? I think that's going to be a larger ticket in the future. Just really calculate your volume. They're looking for cases and rolls, and our beef doesn't come in cases. Of course, our beef comes by the pound. Our beef comes not in rolls. It came in vacuum sealed packs. Timing is important. So they're looking for their commitments approximately July and August is when they're starting to shop for this. Now, they can still find you and book you throughout the year. It's never a bad time to reach out to the schools, except for maybe like at the end of the year. You may not want to do that unless you're talking about the following year. But as early as June and July and August, they're wanting to go ahead and solidify this and get it done and do this. Now, I wanted to just mention that, of course, we did not do contracts with our schools. We had no written contracts at first. I think as this grows and as more people figure out, I think it's very important to get a written contract of what you're going to provide for the school and as well as what they're agreeing to buy from you in writing, because they may find a better price later on through the year. They may not be dedicated to you. And I think it's important, if, especially if you're going to change any of your farm practices, to get a contract. Tips for success, of course, we talked about phone and in-person meetings, be realistic, focus on your most local schools, work together, and also consider working together with other farmers. Some other success tips that I think would be great in the future is the poster for them to display, paying attention to their needs, and then asking for feedback as during the process. We're all learning about this because this has been an antiquated practice to actually have schools buy from local farms. So they're not used to it, we're not used to it, and we're all trying to learn here. So asking for feedback about what packaging works best for them. Some of my schools requested 10-pound packs, and that was the common thing. They're simply used to getting cases. So we're trying to, instead of exactly trying to match that, I would talk with them and educate them and say, well, I can do 5-pound packs. I can ask the butcher to do 8-pound packs. You let me know what works best for you and we can adjust it. As this grows, so scale is really important. Of course, we are a smaller scale farm. When I say we have 300 head, that's not ready to butcher at all. That is some mama cows, that's some weanlings, that's some babies, and that's a few ready to butcher. So what can work here to scale up if you want to? If you want to keep it small, you can. You can simply choose your local school, market only to them, and be done. If you want to ramp it up a little bit, I think that butcher shops, local butcher shops, are extremely well positioned for this. Butcher shops could simply reach out to their local farms and say, hey, please bring us your cull cows. We have a tremendous demand for ground beef. So taking the sale barn out of this equation and putting the cattle straight to the butcher shop at a little bit higher price for the farmer, it also positions the butcher to make a tremendous profit because they don't have to pay for the butcher shop. They are the butcher shop. Distributors, I think, are going to be a ticket in the future, as I said, and also maybe some farmer alliances and partnerships and co-ops. I've talked with Muse Farm, who is also participating in this in Louisiana, and they're looking for partner farms who have similar practices. And I think we're also going to be we're going to be playing that role of talking with other farms and saying, we can take your cull cattle if you would sell them to us for just a little bit over what the sale barn is going to give you for them. Um, this is not going away. I don't think that these funds will go away, at least not this year. I think the schools do have this desire to source locally. They know that it's important and they like the PR from it. I don't know that we will continue to get top dollar for this, but I do think that that could be, if we can get a sustainable price that's a compromise, then it could be sustainable in the future. It does enable a lot of farmers and ranchers to really get a huge market very quickly for their product. I was talking to a ranch who is doing absolutely no sales. Um, and what they were talking to me about is they wanted to jump into this retail business, but they're a huge ranch in Louisiana. And so I suggested this to them. I said, look, you don't have to try to jump into this retail thing and sell retail and have freezers and all this kind of stuff. Why don't you get involved with the school and simply take it from straight from your cattle to the butcher shop to the schools? Why don't y'all consider this instead of dealing with so many customers? And it would be a great fit because they're a large scale operation. They ship off a truckload of cull cows every year. And instead of taking that truckload out, they could simply take 10 cull cows per month to their local butcher shop, get it ground, send it to schools, and be done. At really a lot less labor than trying to retail. Looking to see if this is a good fit for your farm. I think some tickets here are you already using a label? Do you already have labeled beef? That's not a tremendously hard process. It's not too time intense, at least in our state. We are allowed to sell state approved beef and USDA beef, not just USDA. So that's to our benefit. And especially, do you have excess volume or product? Like that farm that I talked to you about that has a large ranch, they already ship off a truckload of cull cows. To me, that's a perfect fit for the farm to school program. Do you want to do this long term or temporary? Just a little boost 1 year. I, right now, I think this grant funding is temporary. Um, it may not be a long term fit, so I wouldn't necessarily scale up my farm and take on a huge another lease land to make this happen. I would simply, utilize what I have, sell any extras that I have, and make it work. But there are opportunities for scaling up and making this happen. Time budgeting, make sure you have time to manage this and to actually distribute to the schools on time. It's important to do what you say you're going to do because they're counting on it for their meals. Your location in comparison to schools, if you are 100 miles from your local school, this may not be the best fit. We are in this suburban area and we have lots of schools in our area. So it was within 1 hour drive, I can be at multiple schools. So this was a great fit for our location. And then profit budgeting. It's important to make sure that you're budgeting that profit truly selling an entire cow as all ground beef, especially our little 2 and 3-year-old finishers that are wonderful for steak, is not the most profitable way to simply grind it all and send it to the school versus selling our steaks and cuts. So there's that to be considered. Is your operation, here's another example of how you could diversify. Suppose you're just this farm or ranch who's selling whole and half beef. And that's all you do is sell whole and half to your customers and maybe sell a few to your commercial market. What you could do is simply add this extra diversification of selling retail cuts from the butcher and straight to schools. Maybe take some of your calves that you're selling to the sale barn or to your local truckload sales. You simply take and find a way to finish those out. Maybe contract with another farmer, work together, take your cull cows, and utilize that as this diversification.